The waters of the Persian Gulf carry more than oil. They carry the weight of global power. Every dawn, tankers carve silent paths toward Asia, feeding an industrial giant whose survival depends on what flows from these shores. China's rise has always been fueled by energy, but nowhere is that dependence more fragile or more politically explosive than in the oil fields of Iran. From Shanghai to Dalian and Qingdao, the lifeblood of China's economy arrives under glow of steel and floodlights. Refineries roar through the night, pumping crude through labyrinths of pipes, converting it into the fuel that powers the world's largest manufacturing engine. But behind every drop lies a reality Beijing cannot ignore. Without Iran, China's energy security collapses. For years, China and Iran have built a partnership that defies international pressure. A partnership reinforced by billions in infrastructure, ports, railways, industrial corridors stretching across deserts and coastlines. Chabahar stands as a monument to this alliance, an entry point into Central Asia, a strategic prize in China's belt and road ambition. These investments are not merely economic. They are geopolitical anchors, binding the two nations in a shared destiny. But the equilibrium shattered when the United States withdrew from the nuclear agreement. Sanctions tightened like a vice. Iranian oil exports plummeted. Overnight, the corridors of power in Tehran darkened, and Beijing was forced to choose between compliance and survival. China chose survival. Tankers changed names. Shipping routes went dark. A hidden network of shell companies emerged across Asia, clandestine pathways built to keep Iranian oil flowing east. Yet today, a far more dangerous crisis looms. Iran faces deep internal instability. Protests escalate, institutions fracture, and intelligence agencies warn of the scenario Beijing fears most: the collapse of the Iranian state. A collapse that could sever China's access to one of its last dependable oil suppliers. Signs of preparation are unmistakable. Chinese naval presence grows in the Indian Ocean. Advisors embedded with Iranian units conduct joint exercises. Cyber warfare teams operate in near silence, but their fingerprints appear across regional networks. China is not watching from afar. It is positioning itself, because for Beijing, Iran is not just a partner. It is a strategic firewall against Western dominance in the Middle East. If Iran falls, China's influence recedes. The Belt and Road Initiative falters. The carefully built image of China as a global protector disintegrates. And so, intervention becomes more than an option. It becomes a strategic necessity. Yet intervention in the modern world rarely begins with soldiers. It begins with invisible offensives, cyber strikes, information warfare, financial manipulation, weapon transfers hidden in the shadows of night. But if these measures fail, Beijing may consider the unthinkable: securing the Strait of Hormuz and protecting Iranian ports with naval power. The United States is fully aware of this possibility. Simulations run in war rooms show that even a limited confrontation between Washington and Beijing in these waters could trigger catastrophic escalation. Carrier groups patrol the region with heightened vigilance. Surveillance drones track every Chinese vessel entering the Indian Ocean. The margin for miscalculation grows thinner by the hour. Around the world, markets tremble whenever instability flashes in the Gulf. A disruption of Iranian oil, even temporary, would send shockwaves through the global economy. Supply chains already stretched thin would fracture. Fuel prices would soar, and the ripple effect would reach every household on Earth. Meanwhile, Russia watches closely. For Moscow, chaos in the Persian Gulf presents opportunity. With Western attention diverted, Russia could expand its influence in Europe, strengthen its diplomatic leverage, and deepen its own strategic ties with China. Some intelligence reports even suggest coordinated planning between Beijing and Moscow, an emerging axis shaped not by ideology, but by necessity. But beneath the surface of strategy lies an ideological struggle. China and Iran share a vision of a world no longer governed by Western dominance. For them, the collapse of a partner is not just a geopolitical setback. It is an existential threat to the future they seek to build. Deep within command centers in Beijing, timelines are drawn. Thresholds are evaluated. Military units are moved into position. Cyber divisions stand on alert. Each action pushes the world one step closer to a point of no return. As instability unfolds in Tehran streets, China faces a defining decision: act now to keep Iran standing, or risk losing everything it has built over decades. Intelligence analysts warn that this decision point is imminent, perhaps months away, maybe sooner. If Beijing intervenes, the United States will respond. And if both superpowers move simultaneously into the Persian Gulf, the world could witness its most dangerous military standoff since the Cold War, one that threatens not only economies and oil routes, but global stability itself. If conflict escalates, nuclear command structures across multiple nations could be placed on alert for the first time in decades. The world order would fracture, markets would crash. Millions could face humanitarian crises as the region sinks into turmoil. And yet, behind every military maneuver, every diplomatic breakdown, every flicker of instability, lies a single question: how far will China go to protect the flow of Iranian oil? Because if Beijing chooses intervention, it will not be a regional conflict. It will reshape the balance of power for an entire generation. A new world may emerge, born not from diplomacy, but from the collision of great powers in the waters of the Persian Gulf. And history will remember this moment as the turning point. The world waits. The markets shake. And in Beijing, the decision that could redefine global order draws closer. The world waits. The markets shake. And in Beijing, the decision that could redefine global order draws closer. But to understand the true magnitude of what's at stake, we must look beyond the headlines, beyond the diplomatic statements and official denials. Because what's happening right now is not just about oil. It's about the architecture of power itself. For decades, the United States has maintained dominance in the Middle East through a combination of military presence, strategic alliances, and control over energy flows. The petrodollar system, where oil is traded primarily in U.S. currency, has been the foundation of American economic supremacy. But China's deepening relationship with Iran threatens to dismantle this entire structure. Imagine a scenario where Iranian oil flows exclusively to China, paid for not in dollars, but in yuan, where Chinese naval forces guarantee the security of Persian Gulf shipping lanes, where Beijing, not Washington, becomes the ultimate arbiter of Middle Eastern stability. This is not speculation. This is a future China is actively building, and the timeline is accelerating faster than most realize. Satellite imagery shows Chinese military infrastructure expanding across the Indian Ocean. New naval bases, advanced radar installations, submarine facilities capable of projecting power deep into waters once dominated by the U.S. Navy. These are not defensive measures. These are the building blocks of a new regional order. If you're finding this analysis valuable, hit that subscribe button now, because as this crisis unfolds, you need to stay ahead of the narrative. Subscribe for intelligence-driven analysis that goes beyond what mainstream media will tell you. The Iranian regime knows its survival may soon depend entirely on Chinese support, and that dependence creates a dangerous dynamic. Because if Tehran believes Beijing will intervene to save it, the regime may take risks it would otherwise avoid. Provocative actions in the Strait of Hormuz, aggressive posturing toward regional rivals, even direct confrontation with American forces, all calculated on the assumption that China will not allow Iran to fall. But what if that calculation is wrong? What if Beijing's red lines are not where Tehran thinks they are? The potential for a catastrophic miscalculation has never been higher. And then there's the human cost. Lost in the strategic calculations and geopolitical chess games are the millions of ordinary people whose lives hang in the balance. Iranian citizens struggling under sanctions, Chinese workers dependent on stable energy supplies, American service members stationed in harm's way, global populations facing economic devastation if supply chains collapse. This is why every decision made in the coming weeks matters. Why every signal sent between capitals carries enormous weight. Why the world cannot afford to look away. Subscribe now to stay informed as this crisis develops. Because when superpowers collide, the consequences reach every corner of the globe. And you deserve to understand what's really happening. The question is no longer whether China will act to protect Iranian oil. The question is when, and how the world will respond when it does. Because one thing is certain, the decision made in Beijing will echo through history. It will determine whether we enter a new era of multipolar competition or whether the existing order can hold. The clock is ticking. The forces are positioning. And the world stands at a crossroads that will define the next generation of global power. This is the China factor, and it's unfolding right now.
South China Sea forces are mobilizing.